Big time tonight. I know.
Nice.
Well, great to be with you. How many were out there today on campus with us? Wasn't that a great day?
Yeah.
And I sure enjoyed myself, had a lot of fun. And am I looking good on here? Okay, someone had asked us to record this. He said he really wanted to be here tonight. Someone we met today, but he really needed to be at a lab that he's also doing tonight. So that's why we're doing that. Anyway, my name's Tom Short. I know a lot of you met you before today, or met you today or before. And I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I've been asked tonight to speak on the subject of dating, marriage, relationships, and so on. What a good thing that's to talk about. As I take it here, I see a married couple over here, and one half there, and one there, and I see a half of one there, and but the rest of you still have life's second biggest decision in front of you. Biggest decision is whether or not you're going to follow Christ, and that's what we want to, you've got to figure that one out first. Get your life right with God through Jesus Christ. That's number one. The second biggest decision you'll ever make in your life has to do with finding a life partner. Finding a life partner. And it's so important. And I have seen marriages that are wonderful, and I've seen marriages that are terrible. I've seen marriages where some people, it seems like they bring out the worst in one another. They once were sweet, wonderful, loving people, but somehow they fight like cats and dogs now. They hate one another. Sometimes they kill one another. I have some rental properties, and back in Columbus, and sure enough, in one of my rental properties once, about 2 years ago, the husband shot and killed his wife. And it was devastating. Devastating to the kids, obviously devastating to her, devastating to him, it's devastating to me. It's devastating to so many people. And I thought, what happened? What went wrong there? They once really were in love with one another. Something really went wrong. I know others, and I know because of this, dare I say, a lot of people think, well, I never want to get married. And that grieves me to hear that, because when I hear people say, I never want to get married, I've given up on the institution, or it doesn't work, or whatever, I think about myself, and I think, I got married 41 years ago. And in those 41 years, my relationship with my wife, it's been just the opposite. We've brought out the best in one another. We didn't bring out the worst in one another. We brought out the best in one another. I have no doubt that I'm a better man because of my wife and because of my marriage to her. No doubt at all. I just shudder to think who I would be today if it weren't for her. On the other hand, I will also add, I have no doubt she's a better woman today because of me. And I think she would say that too. I'm confident she would. And as both of us have grown as people and have become more mature and better people, we've also become more and more one and wonderful as a couple and as joined together in the Lord. Marriage today is under assault. It has been for a number of years. Way back in the late 50s, became something culturally known as the sexual revolution. It was a devastatingly negative thing. It was a bad thing. We were promised freedom. We were promised that we can do what we want. We can be free now. We can live how we want. And I remember even the song we said, "All we need is love." Dun, 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 dun. You guys know that one? All you need is love. Dun, 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 dun. All you need is love, love. Love is all you need. But you know what? We never found it. We found lust. We found hatred. We found broken marriages. We found the family began to break down like never before. We found lives got ruined. We found an explosion of STDs, of abortions, of domestic violence. You just name it. Every way you look at it, what was promised was not delivered. What was promised was not delivered. I remember I mentioned today, I hadn't thought about this girl in quite some time, but for some reason she came to my mind today. Way back in the 1970s, about 76, 77, this was kind of early in the sexual revolution days, wasn't it? And I remember being at the Ohio State University, and I was talking to this girl, and she said that she had sex for recreational purposes. And I remember two things about that night. Number one, I'd never heard anyone say that before. I'd never heard anyone say that. And number two, I remember the emptiness in her eyes. I remember this girl looked like she just had lost her soul. And that was my feeling when I left that night after having, I was witnessing to her. I wonder what I was doing with a girl like that night. I was witnessing to her. And I remember there's just such an emptiness, a look in her soul of hurt, of pain, of lostness. And now, of course, that's a far more common thing, isn't it, for people to talk that way? But I'd never heard anyone talk that way before. And so the sexual revolution is not delivered. It's failed us. And one of the worst ways it's failed us is in the family. So I want to talk a little bit about what God says about family and marriage. And you can think about how this relates to what you've been told. And I want to suggest that God's way is best, okay? The first question comes up, where did marriage get started? Whose idea is this? And if you have a Bible tonight, which I don't know if you do or not, but I brought mine, and I'm going to tell you the very first marriage was with a guy named Adam and a woman named Eve. And it's interesting what happens because this is found in Genesis chapter 2 of the Bible, right there at the very beginning. And it's interesting how the scripture talks about this because in Genesis 1, you see a repeating phrase. God did this, and God saw it was good. God did this, and it was good. God did this, and it was good. God did this, and it was good. Then you run across a very, very interesting thing, and it says in if you'll bear with me just for 1 second, it says, verse 18 of Genesis chapter 2, then the Lord God said, it is not good. That's really interesting, because until now, everything was good. But in Genesis 2:18, suddenly there's something that's not good. And it says this, it was not good for the man to be alone. So God's going to solve the problem. God's going to solve the problem. And how's he going to solve it? He says, I'll make him a helper suitable for him. So out of the ground, the Lord formed the different beasts of the earth and so on. And then none of them were found that were suitable. None were found that were suitable. You keep reading. And it says in verse 21, so the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam. And he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in his place. So we took the rib out, By the way, can I give you a quick, kind of cool trivia question, or Bible trivia thing? It's more than trivia, interesting things. Do you remember how they used to operate on people? Like back, say, in the Civil War time, they give them, some whiskey and a sock or a bullet to bite on and cut their arm off or something like that, or dig into them or whatever. That was kind of gruesome and brutal, wasn't it? Now what do they do when they operate on you? Put you to sleep. You know how they came up with that idea? This verse right here. The guy who discovered modern anesthesiology, he was reading the Bible, and he noticed how God put Adam into a deep sleep, and then he took the rib out of his side. And from there he said, I wonder if we can put people to sleep before we cut into them. And he began a search for how to do that, and that's where we got our modern day anesthesia from. Thank the Lord, someone took Genesis literally. If you've ever had your wisdom teeth out, they put you to sleep to do it, right? Anyway. So the Lord took a rib and he formed the woman, verse 23, then the man said, this is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. That's kind of a real literal translation of it. What he literally said, God created Eve, and there she stood right in front of him, and he goes, wow, man. That's why we call her woman. Not really. Not really. And then it says this, For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother, and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. This was the beginning of marriage. This was the first institution God ever created. In time, God would later on create government. He would create the church. These are the institutions God creates: family, government, church, to help develop us, help raise us, help us become what we ought to be in a civilized society. But the first he did was the family. And God created the family, and God created marriage. We didn't create it. Man didn't create it. Humans didn't create it. God created it. And it's the foundation of society. It's the foundation of culture. It's the foundation of a civilized people. Can I dare say, if the family breaks down and does not survive, the culture will not long survive. The society will not long survive. Anarchy will prevail. People will turn on one another. People will begin to hate one another, and people in the society will implode and destroy itself in time. And indeed, marriage is, as I said, under assault in our culture today. More and more people aren't getting married. More and more people are delaying marriage. I read just this, today as I was reading, the average age for guys to get married now, 29 years old. You know, not long ago, when I was your age, it was like 22 years. That's moved back quite a bit. And I think the average age for women is 27, 28. So it's a big change with people. People having less children, growing number of people saying they don't even want to be married, and a growing number of marriages that fail because they operate on an entirely different basis than what God gave us in the Bible. God created marriage, and God told us how a marriage ought to work and how a family ought to work. And because we've rejected that, we're seeing the breakdown of the marriage in the family, in the society today. So that's God's plan. And I'd like to suggest to you, marriage is a good thing. And family is a good thing. I don't know what God has for each of you personally. Some people, God calls to live a life of singlehood. But generally speaking, people do get married. And I'd like for you to think about marriage as a good thing. Because it's not good. What's not good? But there's this loneliness. The man was alone. What was the solution? God brought marriage, and God created. He brought that into the world. So if that's the case, and you want your marriage to work, you want your family to work, I have a thesis, and that is one of the reasons many families don't work now, many marriages break down, is because the roots of destruction for their marriage were being laid long before they ever got married. You know, you don't start, when you get married, you don't start like, you bring your life in with you. Marriage is joining of two people, so it's not like it starts fresh right there like I have no history and no past. Indeed, when I brought myself into my marriage with Roz, she brought herself into her marriage with me, we brought our past in as well. And I think that often people are laying the destructive, they're planting the destructive seeds while they're single, and then they get married and they wonder, why do things not work out? Why do we fight all the time? Why aren't we getting along? Why is this, we thought this would be working, why isn't it working? And sometimes the destruction of it was laid before they got married. And so I want to say to you, if you want to have a successful marriage, now's the time to be thinking about how to do it. You don't start like, during your marriage counseling. You don't start, on your honeymoon. If you want to have a successful family, you should be thinking about what's that going to take now, because you're all adults. You're all adults. And the seeds you're sowing of life now, you will be harvesting in the years to come. Habits you develop now, attitudes you have now, they don't all change just because you walk down an aisle and say, I do. you are who you are, and you bring that into the marriage. And so you want to learn how now to be the person, you want to be training yourself now to be the person who would be a good husband or wife then. One thing I know in my own life, I hoped, and I probably did, I tried to get a lot of my bad qualities that made me really unlikable, I tried to get them out of my life by having conflicts with my roommates. Because I knew I was going to live with them forever. I tried to get them out of my life by the time I met my wife. So in other words, these rough edges on me that needed to be smoothed out, I tried to get close enough to some of my roommates, because the same conflicts I'd have with them, the same things I'd have with my wife. But if I learned how to get along with them, then I could take that into my marriage and be a person, get along with someone I live with. See what I'm saying? If I can't get along with them, I won't be able to get along with my wife. And so what do you want to do? Practice well on your roommates, because they're not going to be your lifelong partners. Practice well, and if you got problems, get them worked out with them first. When I think of marriage, there's a principle here. Let me see if any of these work. Okay. You know, in the Bible, there's a principle, and it's found in Matthew 6, verse 33. I think it's one of the most important, significant verses in the Bible. Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount, and he says this: "Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things should be added to you." And in life, a constant struggle we have is to trust, do I really believe God is my provider or not? You know, we're to pray in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. Now, it doesn't mean you don't go out and work for it, get a job. But it does mean that you see that all that I have comes from God. God is my provider. It's not my boss. It's not my employer. It's not the guy who writes the check. God is the provider. But he uses someone else to provide for me. Okay? Seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. And I'd like to suggest that one of the big struggles we have in life, because it's not good to be alone, and because all of us have this loneliness factor within us, and all of us look for that to be met in true companionship with someone of the opposite sex, that we can love and will love us, bring security into our life, and so on. There's a tendency to make that the number one thing we are seeking in life. And I'd like to suggest that your number one goal in life should not be seeking anything, not a girl, not if you're a girl, not a guy, not job, not money. Number one thing we should be seeking in life is God. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Not second, not third, but seek first. And that means that in all aspects of life, I'm saying to God, you're first. You're first place. I want you to be first in my job. I want you to be first in my money. I want you to be first in my education. I want you to be first in my relationships. I want you to be first in how I relate with the opposite sex. I want you to be first in every aspect of my life. How this worked out with me, I kind of viewed myself as being that's me. All right. And there was a certain woman over here. Everyone has their hair like that these days anyway. I'm just trying to. And that's her. We'll just call her for the time being Miss X, because I didn't know who she was at the time. And I thought, and then God is up here. And it was my desire and my faith, as I thought of this idea of seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, what I anticipated was that in life, I'm going to seek God, and there's going to be someone out here, we'll call her Miss X, right? And Miss X is going to be seeking God, and somehow, as I'm seeking God and as she's seeking God, whoever she is, we are going to meet together in God. God will bring us together. Now that's opposed to saying, I'm going to do this. Or she's going to be doing this. You know, I'm going to be looking for her. I'm going to be fixing my eyes on her. I'm going to be thinking about her. And I'm going to be seeking her. I said, no, I'm going to be seeking God. And the way it worked in my mind and my faith was that as I sought God, God would bring the right person into my life. I believed that if I sought for a wife, I could get one. I don't know what you think about yourself, where your level of confidence is. But mine was, I thought, if I want a wife, I think I can go get one. But I also don't want a wife. I want the wife God has for me. That's what I want. I don't just want a wife. There's plenty to choose from out there. You can even get them online, I guess. I don't know, from Russia or somewhere. I don't know. There's plenty of wives that want women out there but that's not what I wanted. I wanted the Lord's wife for me. I didn't want the Lord's wife. I wanted the one the Lord had for me. And that was a big decision for me because I had to leave something in God's hands. I had to trust the Lord for this. I had to believe that God could meet my need. And there were times, we want to take things into our own hands. We want to take things into our own. We want to say, I'm going to have to be the one to take care of this if it's going to happen. And this was a challenge for me. Can I trust God to do this? Now, in full disclosure, I was a young man when I got married. I was 20 years old when I got married. And so somebody said, well, it's easy. Then, the pressure gets on as the years go higher. And so I want to talk about that in a minute. But the first point I just want to say is, it is a trust, no matter what your age, to say, I'm going to trust that God can provide for me. I'm going to trust. This is a test. Do we believe God sees? God knows my need. God cares about me personally. God will provide what I need, and God will give me and bring the person into my life. And so this was my goal. Seek first, and Matthew 6:33 is our verse. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Now, of course, he's talking about food and clothing and so on, but we can trust that God will provide all we need. I look back on the testing I had in my life as a Christian during that time, and I want to say it was precious. It was a time of refining for my heart and soul. It was a time of testing. It was a time of believing. I had to ask, can I trust God will provide for me? Like I said, I didn't have to wait long because I got married at 20. But I had to ask, can I trust God will take care of it? What if do I have to grasp myself, or can I trust God's provision for me as I seek him? And that's what I did. And God did provide for me. Well, what do you do until then? So that's the principle here. But until then, does that mean you do nothing? Well, of course not. And that leads to the second principle I want to say. Number one is we seek first God's kingdom. The second one, and I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound worldly. So will you forgive me if I sound kind of worldly right now? Okay?
God bless.
Thank you. Oh, you're saying I don't mean for this to sound worldly, but it will. Do you ever kind of rate people like that person's a 7 or a 5 or something like that? And what do you want to marry? You want to find a 10, don't you? You want to find a 10, right? You maybe not thought this way. As a matter of fact, I'm sure not a single one in this room has thought this way at once. But in case you know others who think this way. And second principle I'd like to say is this. If you want to marry a 10, don't go looking for one. Rather focus on becoming a 10. You know what I'm saying? Focus on being one. I have found, and again, this sounds so worldly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that sounds so worldly. But I've found, dare I say, that the 7s find one another, the 6s find one another, the 8s find one another, the 10s find one another. you're not, now I know in my case, I'm the exception, I definitely married up big time. But by and large, you're going to find someone who you deserve. God will bring someone into your life who you deserve. And if you are a 3 in life, God's not going to bring you a 7. If you want to marry 7, better be 1. If you want to marry an 8, better be 1. And so what do you do at this time in your life? What I want to suggest, so many people, they're interested in dating. They're interested in finding the right person. They're interested in they've got in their mind what kind of person I want. I think she's pretty. I think she's attractive. I'm speaking from the guy's point of view here. I think that's the type of girl, she turns me on. She does that. Have you ever asked how you're doing? How are you? Are you the type person that would attract the type person you would hope to marry someday? And if you're not, then stop looking around and start focusing on making yourself a better person. Make yourself a better person. Make yourself a more attractive person. That's what you ought to be working on at this point. Now, when I say that, so we're going to stop talking about being a 10 or whatever, because when the world talks about that, they're usually talking about it in very superficial ways. What I want to talk about is that if you want to marry, if you're a guy and you want to marry a woman of God, be a man of God. If you're a woman and you want to marry a man of God, then you be a woman of God. If you want to marry a person who's strong in faith, you better be strong in faith. If you want to marry a good Christian, you better be a good Christian. If you want to marry a person who's really loving, you better be really loving. See what I'm saying? Don't just scout around for what you hope that your prospective person will be like. Become the person God wants you to be and excel in that, and you'll find God will bring people into your life that match you. That's how he does it, because you're going to meet in God. And God will bring people into your life that match you. I want to encourage you, aim high for yourself. Aim high for yourself. Become a man or a woman of great faith. Become a man or a woman of strong character, of great love. Become a person who really cares about other people. And God will bring into your life someone who really cares about other people. You'll get what you deserve. I kind of have to joke, in my case, it was kind of interesting. I'll tell some personal stories here. Just a little background. My mom, about the time I was a young Christian, my dad had died a couple years earlier, and he died as a relatively young man. And to be honest, my mom was struggling with anger towards God over that. And right at a time when I was becoming a really strong Christian. And so she was not only angry at God, but she's angry she lost my dad, but now she feels like I'm loving God and she's kind of angry at God. It was a little bit of, it was tough on her. And she was really struggling with bitterness and anger. And I remember when we, it's interesting because my mom, I didn't go to college. I went to one semester and that's it. I went to one semester of college. And my mom always wanted me to go to college. And she thought that was the key to her being a successful parent as a child, all her children graduated from college. Well, so anyway, it's interesting. This is just a fun little side note. So we're talking to my mom about thinking about getting married, Roz and I. And my mom tries to talk Roz out of it. Do you guys know that? Have I told you in terms of that? Try to talk her out of it. And literally we're sitting there, having dinner, and my mom turns to Roz and says, "You don't want to marry him." And it wasn't funny at the time. She said, "You don't want to marry him." And Roz, obviously wondered what's so wrong with me. And she said, "Are you ready for this?" She's really angry. She said, and remember, we're talking about you get what you if you're a 7, you get a 7, so on. She goes, "Do you realize when he was at home, we'd be out watching TV and he'd be in there reading his Bible. We go to bed, he's still reading his Bible. We wake up the next morning, he's already up, he's reading his Bible. Now, do you want to marry a guy like that?" And Roz said, "Well, that's just the type of thing I admire in him, And but again, Roz wanted a man who was a man of the Word, And I was becoming a man of the Word, and that's what attracted her to me. It wasn't what my mom thought would be attractive in a guy, but of course she wasn't going to be the one marrying me. But if you want, in other words, become what you're interested in. Become what you want to get. If you want someone who's loving, you be loving. If you want someone who's spiritually mature, you be spiritually mature. If you want someone excited about Jesus, you be excited about Jesus. Don't focus on, I want to find this. Focus on, I want to become this. And God will bring people into your life. When I talk about becoming a 10, what I want to suggest is this. Number one, I'm going to speak guys for a minute. Guys, I think there's some things that you really need to focus on at this stage of your life. And if you don't have these down before you get married, your marriage is going to be tough. Your marriage is going to be, you're going to struggle. If you start trying to learn this stuff after you get married, you're behind the 8 ball, you're late. Here's the 3 things I would suggest for you. Number one, figure out your calling in life. Figure out your calling in life. What do you really want to do? What's God called you to do? What are you going to do? Where are you going? I still remember with Roz articulating with her, this is what I believe God is calling me to do. And asking her, do you want to join me in this? That's what it was. I wasn't asking her just to marry me. I was asking her to buy into the calling in life that God had on my life. And I felt it my responsibility, if I was going to have her be my wife, I felt it my responsibility to share that with her as clearly as I could so that she knew what she's getting into. Because I felt God's call was on my life. Okay? Figure out your calling. Not just your vocation. Okay? That's not the same thing. Not just your career, but your calling. I believe God has a calling on each of our lives. Finding it, we get into the Word, we read the Word, we seek God, we ask God, we pray to God, we get good advice, we get good counsel, we try and understand big themes in the Word, we seek the will of God for our lives. But if you never find God's calling on your life, ultimately you'll never really be fulfilled. One of the greatest treasures in life is, and this is what I tell my kids, find God's calling and then figure out a way, if possible, how you can actually get paid to do it. And if you can do that, you've had a home run in life. Because a lot of people are spending so much of their time doing things that's not God's calling. And they only have a few hours here or there for the things God really has called them to do. And so, number one, find His calling. Number two, figure out a way that you can provide. Okay? Don't be late on that. Figure out a way how you can provide there's one thing that in Ephesians 5, it says the husband loves his wife by providing for her and by protecting her, which is the third thing. How do we protect? You might have to sometime punch a guy in the nose sometime, but the way most of us do our protecting now is we protect with the Word. We protect the ideas we hold. We protect a person's dignity. We protect, as a husband, we protect her physically, but we protect her heart. We protect her self-image. We protect her dignity. We protect her as a person. And those are things and that us men are called to do. I want to draw another little diagram for you. And if you will, turn to Ephesians chapter 5. Or not Ephesians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And right at the end, like one of the very last verses there, it says, now may God sanctify you entirely. Someone's got a Bible, you looking it up? Can you read it for me? May God sanctify you entirely. And what are the 3 things he says to sanctify?
Spirit, soul, and body.
Spirit, soul, and body. And I think there's some interesting, what verse? 1 Thessalonians 5?
23.
1 Thessalonians 5:23. Might he sanctify you spirit, soul, and body. I've observed that in the world we do it the exact opposite. we think of body, soul, and spirit. And so to me, as I meditated on this verse, I thought about how God, as we seek God, how God brings people together and the stages of bringing people together. And how God does it is spirit, soul, and body. How the world does it is body, soul, and spirit. Meaning, the first thing I ask is what she look like. And again, I'm saying from the guy's point of view. Is she hot? Is she cute? Does she turn me on? That's the first thing we look to. And then we ask, can we talk to one another? Do we get along with one another? And then that's the soul. The first thing's the body. Is she hot? Next is the soul. Can we get along with one another? Do we talk? Do we enjoy being? Finally, spirit, like our religious views, that works out great. But how many people do we know who don't even care about that? Yesterday, a Christian girl was telling me she's about to marry a Muslim man. She wants to marry a Muslim man. I say, you've got two very different religious views. The spiritual needs to be predominant. The spiritual needs the foundation. The spiritual needs to be the most important. But you're putting it last place. You're saying the other two works out. We like one another. We get along with one another. The spiritual will work out. And God, I think, says just the opposite. No, that's the foundation. That's the most important thing. We, like I said, put body first usually. What's he look like? What's she look like? Can I give you a hint? I want to be brutally honest here, okay? I want to be brutally honest. Guys, if you're thinking of marrying a girl because of the way she looks, make sure you meet her mother. Because that's what she's going to look like in about 30 years. You know? Girls, if you're thinking of marrying a guy because of the way he looks, make sure you meet her daddy. Because he's going to have a pot belly and look that way one day too. You know? That's the one you're not going to get a pot?
I have no.
Okay. But my point is, we don't look the same all of our lives. Looks change. Looks change. And looks, as they change, tend to deteriorate over time. Very few people who look better when they're 70 than they did when they were 20. You know? But on the other hand, other aspects of us can become more beautiful, more attractive as we grow in the Lord. And that's what will be there. I remember when I was considering being married, the biggest question I remember being asked, my pastor, because again, I was 20, and he asked me this question. He said, Tom, do you want to grow old with Roz? And I'd never even thought about that. I had trouble picturing her as being old. You know, I just couldn't picture it. Like, what would that mean, growing old with her? I couldn't picture me growing old, you know, let alone her. But I had to stop and think about that, because I wasn't going to marry her for 5 years. I was going to marry her for life. And I had to think, you know, what happens? What happens if I live to be 60? Which I've already done. What happens if I live to be 70? She lives to be 70. What happens if we're 80? We don't look the same. Am I still going to love her then? Because if I'm only loving her for her looks, that wears off. Trust me, that wears off. So what do? We're not, whereas the world says body, that's first thing I notice. Soul, my emotional attachment, my intellectual attachment, that's really important. Spirit, who cares, you know, religion's not that important. We'll work it out. And I'd like to say that we ought to be just the opposite. The first level is spirit. The spiritual of life. And I would like to suggest that at this level, we relate to one another. It says in 1 Timothy 5:1, he says, relate 1 and 2, relate to the younger women as, who knows? Sisters. And that as you begin healthy relationships, and again, if you're a girl, rearrange this. When I'm replying, I'm primarily speaking. Since I can't keep saying everybody, I'm referring to guys here. But girls, you just substitute in the other words. But you look at the first thing, you have a healthy relationship with the girls in your life, and you relate to them as sisters. And I know some of you think, my sister, ew, but relate to them as a sister that would be a healthy relationship. Someone you would care for, someone you have a healthy relationship, someone you would protect, someone you'd watch out for, someone that you would just see her as a person that's kind of my family. And I want to encourage you in Niner Christian life. I want to encourage you in your Christian fellowship. Learn to regard the other sisters as sisters. If you're a guy, learn to regard the girls as your sister. Girls, learn to look at the guys as brothers. Learn to look at us, we're spiritual family. No partiality. I'm not trying to single one out. I'm not trying to cozy up to one. I'm not trying to win favor with one. But with all the girls, an impartial relationship. They're my sisters. They're all my sisters. All the guys are my brothers. And I want to relate to them in that way. All right? The next level would be the soul. And by soul, in the scripture, we think of your emotional, your intellectual, your conversations, kind of the part of you that talks with one another. And here, when you have that real soul relationship, this is a spiritual relationship just based in Christ with others. But when you start talking about other things, your likes, your dislikes, sharing your family history, sharing your dreams, your hopes, your basically, shall we say, falling in love with one another at a different level, different than you would with your sisters. And this is what we would call, the world might call dating, or I often use the word courtship. But it's where you're beginning to single someone out. And you're beginning to think, maybe this could be the one. And you're beginning to spend some private time or personal time together with one another. Like I said, sharing your heart, sharing your hopes, your dreams, your past, your present, talking about things you like to do, and getting to know one another at that deeper level as if this might be the one. Now, I encourage you, go into this carefully. Because this word dating can be it can mean so many different things to so many different people. And some people say, it's Friday night, I gotta have a date. I don't care who it is, I just need to have a date. And that's how they date. And I would like to encourage them, as Christians, are more intentional, are more respectful. Because again, we do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit. We do things for the benefit of another. And so we enter into a dating or courtship relationship. I think shouldn't be often with a lot of people. Ideally, it wouldn't be wonderful if it was only with one person ever. But you begin to get to know them at a deeper level. But you want to be careful, because as you're developing, you're falling in love, you're developing an intimacy with this person. And the reason you want to be careful is because if it doesn't work out, you leave behind a broken heart. You leave behind someone who's, you crushed them, you broke their hearts, you dashed their dreams, whatever. And so we want to be careful with one another's hearts. We want to not only guard our own heart, but guard one another's hearts. We want to protect one another. We want to be careful at this time that you're not promising things that you're not going to deliver on. You're not implying things that aren't going to happen. You're not taking advantage of one another's feelings. You're not manipulating someone's feelings. You're respecting that, and you're moving into that type of relationship carefully. I suggest you don't move into it alone. And by what that I mean is that you get good advice from people. In my life, like I said, my father was passed away. My mom wasn't really agreeing with anything I did in those days because she didn't want me to serve the Lord. But I had 3 men in my life that I determined I would not make steps forward in my relationship with Roz unless all 3 of those men were behind it. I trusted them. They were, all 3 of them were 3 pastors. They were my pastors. I knew that they knew me well enough we weren't a mega church, and so they didn't know who I was. They all knew me personally. They all knew me well. One was my best friend. Another one I was living with his family at the time. And so these were people that I could trust. But I was determined that if they had yellow flags flashing or red flag flashing, I would not move ahead until we had a green light. I had a green light from them. With my own kids, none of them moved forward in dating or courtship, engagement, and certainly not marriage, without really my wife and I being involved with them. Matter of fact, you know an interesting little fact I was trying to think this through here. I have 5 children, 4 of whom are married, and of the 4 that are married, 3 of them, are you ready for this? 3 of them, my wife and I had picked out who became their spouse before they did. Isn't that pretty amazing? We just saw it. We dropped a hint or so. I remember, have you considered? Have you noticed? You know, have you ever thought about so-and-so? You know? And we had those type discussions with our kids. And we were a step ahead. Now, in fairness, they said, yeah, I have considered, you know, but we initiated some with them. And the 4th one, I don't know if we were onto it before he was, but certainly he was the longest period of indecisiveness, and he talked quite often with us, quite regularly, about his relationship with her. Why do you want to do that? Because love is blind. I don't know if you realize this, but love is blind. Falling in love is such a powerful, wonderful thing. We can be blind to a person's weaknesses. We can be blind to our weaknesses. We can be blind to, sometimes we can walk into something. I remember one time there was a guy, a friend of mine, and he was living with my wife and I. And, we were renting out a room to her, and he was just madly in love with her. And I just, you know, every time we talk, I said, I'm not sure you really know her well enough. I don't think it's going to work. I don't see it like you do. But it's, you know, I said, I'm not the one marrying her. You are. So if you really feel led that way, fine, but I just don't see it. And you know what? Literally, they got married, and he came back from the honeymoon, and you know, he said to a friend of mine, he said, why didn't anyone ever warn me she had these problems? And my friend said, wait a minute, I thought Tom probably like a dozen times warned you. The question is, why didn't you listen? Why didn't you listen? Their marriage, by the way, he ended up committing adultery on her. And they ended up breaking up and divorced. One of the few people I've ever married that ended up getting a divorce. And it was really, really sad. But the truth is, sometimes people, they just don't see things because love can make us blind. Be careful. Be careful about that. So include others. Keep this healthy. Keep this focus on communication. Okay? I know that lots of times people get way too involved, way too fast physically. And lots of times, you know, we're in the generation that you get involved sexually really, really fast. Several years ago, I was at North Carolina State University, and we were talking about sex and what's appropriate sexually. And this girl said to me, she said, you know, God understands that we have to have sex now. Because back when the Bible was written, they all got married at age 15, and now we don't get married at 15 anymore, and God understands that it's okay to have sex even though we're not married, because we get married later now. And I said, no, that's not true. She said, yes, it is. I said, is not, is so. You know? And I explained to her God's standards and reasons behind waiting till marriage. And we talked about that, okay? And she listened. Well, that was in the fall. I came back there the following spring, and lo and behold, right as I was getting started preaching, she was out there. And after I got things going and the crowd developed, I asked her if there was any questions, and she raised her hand. She said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, well, I think I do. Are you the girl I talked to last time? We were talking about sex and so on. She said, yeah. Oh, by the way, she told me, I've got to say one thing. She told me that she and her boyfriend were having sex, and they would get married someday when they're older, but they just couldn't do it now. And I was trying to tell her why that's not right. That marriage does matter. The Bible says marriage matters, not just love, not just intention, but wait for marriage. And I went through it, and I don't have time to go through it tonight unless you really want me to. But there she was then in the spring. She, do you remember me? I said, yeah, were you the girl we talked about, sex before marriage and age and all? She said, yeah, that's me. And I said, well, good. I said, how you doing? She said, doing well. And I said, and she had a big smile on her face, and I said, did you want to say something? She said, well, I just thought I'd tell you. My boyfriend and I decided to stop having sex till we got married. And I said, really? She said, yeah. And to be honest, I was a little surprised. She caught me off guard. And I asked her, I said, it's great. I said, are you glad you did? And she said, yeah, I'm really glad. And I said, well, why are you glad? She said, well, because we talk to one another now. And I thought, what an answer. What an answer. And she said, before it was all about having sex. And it was always this pressure to have sex. And I thought that's what we needed to do, and he wanted to do it. But now we're talking about, and I'm sure that if I would have asked her the previous fall, well, if I would have told her, I'll bet you don't have sex, you never talk to one another. She'd say, oh, no, we talk to one another. But now she realized we talk to one another. And see, now that they would put off the sex for now, and they're having this courtship period, she said, we talk about so many things now. We're really getting to know one another. I'm surprised how much I didn't know about him before, and how much I hadn't shared with him, because it was always the pressure to go to have sex together. And so what she was doing, they were now focusing on the soul. And they were now had a relationship where they put off the physical, and it was forcing them to really get to know one another. And they were preparing themselves for, do we really want to get married? And shall we? And so on. The final is the body. Spirit, soul, and body. The spirituals are sisters. We're developing our Christian beliefs. We're worshiping God. We're involved in church, things like this. Soul is when it's more involved with one person. This, with sisters and brothers, do things as get together, do things as a group, hang out together as a group, fine. But in terms of the soul is when there's one that maybe you start spending some extra time together. You start seeing, is this the one? And then finally, body, i.e. physical sex. This is ready for when you're married. Yes. Marriage. And I would encourage you to wait for that. I told you earlier, many people, they sow the seeds of destruction way too early, way before they get married, because they go to this right away. And then after this, they talk for a while, and in the spiritual, who cares? But if we do it this way, these make healthy relationships. These produce healthy families. These produce healthy self-control, healthy respect for one another, healthy focus on the relationship and not just the physical and the fleshly side, shall we say, of marriage. Okay? Okay. Questions from you? Questions? Quiet? This is the quietest it's been all day for me. You have questions about things I've said? Questions about, yes?
Have you ever talked about soul ties?
Soul ties. I don't know if I've used that terminology.
Well, okay, say you have a lot of sexual partners, and then that person, you get their soul ties and their baggage, and then it keeps multiplying up. Do you think that has something to do with it?
With breakups and divorces, absolutely. You know, in 1 Corinthians 6, it says that even with a harlot, it says, or a prostitute, if you have sex with her, there's a oneness that develops there. And the two become one at that level. And so, yes, anytime you engage sexually with another person, and that reminds me of something else I want to say about avoiding having sex, okay? But, so remind me if I forget this. Anytime you engage sexually with someone, the two become one flesh. Now here's the problem when you break up. There's a bond that's made, and the bond remains, and what breaks up is the people. What's broken is the person. Each person gets broken. And there's something of a bond that remains. And what that means is, if you're the guy, even though you break up, you take a little bit of her with you, and a little bit of you goes with her. And your ability then to really bond with another person is weaker, because someone has a little bit of you and you have a little bit of somebody else. And sometimes people go into a marriage with all kinds of people that they bonded with. And they're bringing 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, how many people are they bringing into the marriage with them? I'm bringing a little bit of 10, 15, how many other girls am I bringing into the marriage with me? And how much of myself did I give away to someone else, and now it's not with me anymore to give to that person? I think of, have you ever seen plywood? You know, plywood is like wood fibers, glue, wood fibers, glue, wood fibers. There's usually 3 levels of wood and 2 levels of glue in between. And if this is a piece of plywood, and you were to, splinter it up like this way, what breaks? The wood breaks. The glue doesn't. The glue remains, but the wood splinters. And I think of that like when we bond with another person and then break up, we get splintered, and there's something about that glue that remains. And so that's one of the reasons very, very dangerous coming into a relationship with in other words, we've had these sexual relationships, then we break up. It brings some of her with me, it leaves some of me with her, and it teaches me, it trains me in the idea of breaking up. Because I've done it before. A lot of people, they get in a marriage and they get divorced, they say, I don't know why it didn't work out. And I said, well, how many people had you had sex with that you broke up with? And they said, well, 7. Well, see, you've already kind of been through 7 divorces already. You might not consider it a marriage and divorce, but the fact you were bound and broke up, bound and broke up, bound and broke up, you've been trained. Every time it gets easier to break up. And every time there's a little bit less of yourself to give to your spouse, and you're bringing your spouse in with yourself and these other women. And so you're right that when we sow these destructive seeds, we reap a harvest. Now, what happens if you've done that? What happens if you've already done that? I think that's where we come to God in real humility and in brokenness and repentance. And we say, oh God, I'm so sorry for what I've done. I didn't realize what I've done. And I ask you, Lord, to cleanse me from what I have. I ask you to cleanse me of my memories. Let me tell you, I've counseled with women, they say, I don't like having sex with my husband. I say, why not? She said, well, every time I do, I can't help but think of past boyfriends. It's like she's bringing those boyfriends into the bed with them. And they're in her memory. They're not in the bed, but they're in her memory. And she says, it reminds me of these past hurts and these past guys. And I say, you need to ask God to cleanse you of those memories. God can do miracles. But don't think that there's no consequences to sin, because there are. There are consequences, and sometimes we need to live with them. We say, oh God, help me overcome, cleanse me of my memories, and God, heal my broken soul, because I've been torn apart. I gave myself to other men or other women. And now there's part of me over there. God, you got to heal my heart. You got to protect my heart. You got to make me whole because it's been broken. It's been torn apart. And it's more than just a prayer, by the way. Sometimes a simple prayer will bring that healing. Sometimes it's really cleansing ourselves, getting in the Word strongly. Sometimes it is. And by the way, when we've done that, the other thing is we can become kind of scared and overly cautious about ever trusting a man or a woman if our heart's been broken before. I know I felt that way. I know lots of people that, I gave myself and they broke my heart. I don't know if I want to go through that again. And to regain that confidence, that faith that God can bring the right person into your life. And so, we seek God and we want to have this person. So yes, healing and cleansed memories. And sometimes it's a process, but we want to work on that. I was going to mention, what was I going to mention? What did I tell you guys to mention?
Avoiding sex.
Avoiding sex, yeah. So today a guy asked me, he said, I'm a Christian, I don't have sex with my girlfriend, but it's so hard not to. It's so easy to fall into it. And, you got any help for me? And, the simplest help I could give was find in Romans 13, verse 14, where we read, put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh in regard to its lusts. What's it mean to make provision? Well, we were alone together in the car. And I don't know, but it just happened. Okay, why were you alone together in the car? We were alone together in her bedroom. And I don't know how, but it just happened. Well, no, it didn't just happen. You were alone together in her bedroom. That's when it happened. We were doing this. We were undressing, and we didn't mean to go all the way, but we did. Well, why'd you go that far? You see what I'm saying? You're making provision. You're making opportunity. You're making it easy to sin. And lots of times, I found Christians think it's kind of like, I'm going to go speeding down the freeway, and right when I hit the speed limit, I'm going to throw the car into park. Or there's a bridge out down there. There's a bridge 1 mile ahead. I'm going to speed right up the bridge and hope I don't fall over the edge. And I suggest the way that you're making provision for the flesh. Can I say, if I could be blunt here, there's a reason foreplay is called foreplay. Because it's intended to end up in something beyond foreplay. But when you are doing things designed to go all the way, and you say, we'll do that, but then we'll stop right at the right time, you're playing with fire, you're making provision, you're going to fail. No, probably. Okay? So make no provision. Be careful about putting yourself in tempting situations. Be careful about putting yourself in places. And one of the best ways to do that is just to be around other people. Don't get alone in places where you can sin, and because you're alone. Okay, that would be one big thing. Don't feed the flesh. Another guy said, asked me today. He said, so hard to not sin. It's so hard not to do that. And what do you suggest for me? And one thing I said, don't feed the flesh. You look at porn, your mind's going to think things. You stare at girls, your mind's going to think things. You allow yourself to lust and fantasize, your mind's going to think things. Okay? Don't do those things. Learn how to control. Learn how to get the victory earlier when it's easier. If you wait until the momentum is going against you, it's really hard to stop the fleshly desires. Learn how to realize, how do they get started? Oh, they get started when I stare at a girl. They get started when I do certain things online. They get started when I think certain things. Well, that's when you need to stop and get the victory, not further down the line. I just said something. What was it? Oh, one other thing. This is radical, and some of you might say it's too late to even think about this. But how, if you want to get married, what age do you think, have you ever thought about what age you think you might get married at?
Yeah.
Throw out some ages you've thought maybe you might get married at. 25, 26, 27,
28.
28, how old are you?
29?
28.
You're 28? Do I hear 29? 29. Do I hear 29? Do I hear 30? Do I hear 30? You know what? So, I'm hearing a lot of 25s to 29s. That's kind of common in our culture, isn't it? To get married about that age. I have a question. When does your body say you want to have sex?
Now.
That's right. And your body is ready and raring to go in your kind of what, I don't know, somewhere in your teen years. And so what some of you are telling me is that you plan to live for like 10 years or so, where your body is saying go, 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 and you're saying no, 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 no. And you're saying that's hard. And you know what? I'd have to agree with you. It probably is hard, 10 years, to fight off what your body is desiring. And so I have a suggestion. Move that potential marriage date down. I told you earlier, how old was I when I got married? 20. So a lot of the intensity of temptation, I didn't face because I was married when I was 20. And I will say that with my kids, my wife and I raised them with the idea that we would like them to be ready to be married around age 20. Meaning, if their education, their financial, their emotional maturity, their ability, like I said, their sense of do they know their calling in life. That was our goal for them. Now, some of them we did better than others. And some of our kids got married. My daughter got married at 20. I remember thinking, wow, and he was 20. I remember telling him, you're kind of young to be getting married now. And he said, well, that's when you got married. Yeah, but that was different. And the point being, though, and they did, and they've got a great marriage, but the point being that we were ready at an age, and so we looked for it. And so I want to say to you, and here's, people wonder this question, how come the church is having so much trouble with young single people? And I'm thinking, you know what, if you can't have sexual self-control and you're involved in sexual immorality, who in the world wants to go to church? You know what I mean? Who wants to go sit in church where everybody around is holy and you're involved in sexual immorality? So either you're going to be involved in a church where everybody's sinning, or you're going to feel very out of place. And so the answer is going to be, I'm just going to stop going until I get married. And then I might come back. And I'd like to suggest that some of you might want to think about lowering the age. Again, you're seeing God, so you don't know when the right person's going to come in your life. But if you want to marry at 10, you want to be a 10, right? And you can, do you visualize that you could be a 10 or whatever, 7, whatever it is, that you could be that by the time you're 20? Or do you have to wait till you're 25 or 28 or 30 to be that person? There's a principle in life. We tend to, if you set the same goal, I want to reach it in 3 months, or the exact same goal, and I got 3 years to meet it. If you set it for 3 months from now, you'll probably meet it. If you set it for 3 years from now, it'll take you 3 years to do it. Because the time expands for what you provide. It's really that simple. Not with everything, but with a lot of things. So what I'd say is, up your level of expectation of the type of person you're going to become. Up your level a bit of how you view who you're going to be when you're going to become a mature, grown-up, responsible, able to be married, able to provide, able to be whatever person, okay? I realize some things you can't control, but there's a lot of things we can. And if you think, I won't be ready till 29, probably not going to be ready till 29. But if you could set the same goal and say, I want to be ready by 22, And you just might be ready by 22, you know. So, good. Any other questions? Yes.
I know you didn't mention anything about this, so like, I just wonder, is it vain to pursue things like, you know, getting a decent haircut, you know, in the gym, things like that, like, is that like,
It doesn't hurt to look good. It doesn't hurt, again, it doesn't hurt to be a desirable person, yeah. That, I mean, I don't think those are primary, because again, I would say, if a girl came to me and said, boy, you know, I'm interested in Brother X because he's really handsome and he's in the gym and boy does he have, you know, cannons for arm, you know, and she said, Tom, I mean, gosh, he probably looks the way you did when you were his age. I would say, that's the last thing, your body. We don't look body, soul, and spirit. Now, that doesn't mean it's totally irrelevant. You know, you don't want to look like slop. Doesn't mean it's totally irrelevant. But I would tell a person that's not the focus. What really is the focus is, are we growing in our emotionally and spiritually, socially, our vocation, our calling. Those are the type of things that will last into a marriage, into a relationship, and that's what's got to be built on. If you've got those things, you'll have a solid relationship, no matter how you look, kind of in a sense. If you don't have those things, then, by the way, you know what else I found? There's nothing wrong with looking pretty or handsome or whatever. There's nothing wrong with giving some attention to your appearance. But I have found that people who give over attention to it and become consumed with it, lots of times, is because they're failing and are really weak in these areas. And so the physical is an area that can distract from the inadequacies emotionally or socially or spiritually and so forth. So nothing wrong with it, but it's the lower priority than the higher. Good.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So like, if you've never grown up, like my parents, they were never married. So like, how do you know? Like, I know you're supposed to look at the word, but you also want to see marriage in your daily life. And like my mom and my stepdad were married, but like they didn't. I don't think they went about it in the correct way. So it's just like, how do you know?
That's a great question. So,
because if it's been like generational, you're like, what is marriage?
yeah, that's a beautiful question. That's an awesome question. So the question is if you've never really had good examples. And I will say I was blessed, and I got to see how they related to one another. I got to observe their life, and how he talked to her, how she talked to him, how they treated one another. I was in their home, and that was a really, really special blessing. I look back on that now. They were just the opposite of what I'd grown up with. And I look what I brought into my marriage. I brought into my marriage what they were doing. And that's how my wife and I, we've adopted things that I saw in particular, she didn't live with them, but that I saw in them. So I think the thing I would say is, there's probably several things. Number one, say, Lord, I have not had this privilege, and I don't want to repeat what I was raised with. And so I ask you to be a father to the fatherless. I ask you to show me what it's like I ask you to mentor me directly, God. But also, God, I pray that you could bring some people into my life, or bring me into their life, that I could really watch them. If you ever had a chance to actually live with a model couple that could mentor you, all the better. But if you can't live with them, there's all kinds of couples you can spend time with. You know, you could ask, seriously, even if it's, hang around with them after church, ask if you can do some things. But you know, if you got a young couple that is a good model Christian couple, you know how you can definitely find time with them? Offer to serve them. Say, I'll give a whole bunch of things. Ask the wife, hey, can I come over and cook with you sometime? Can I come over and help you fix a meal? So all kinds of them say, sure, and do that. And you learn an awful lot just working in the kitchen. Sometimes you learn more by doing something together than by sitting down having a talk. You know, can we fix a meal together? Can I watch your kids? Can I come over and help you around your house? Some things like this. And if a person says yes and invites you into their home to just to hang out with them, not just have a meeting, but to hang out with them, and you're doing it because you're saying, I want to watch and I want to learn. There's an old axiom I believe in, and that's this: more is caught than taught. In life, more is caught than taught. We catch, like we don't learn how to love because we heard a sermon on it. We catch it because we're around people who love. We catch faith because we're around people of faith. And if you've not had those opportunities to think of how can I initiate with some people that I would respect and look up to their relationship, and just figure out some ways that I can get in their home and get around them. And like I said, can I help you cook? Can I help you around your house? Can I watch your kids? You know, and a lot of people would be glad to say, yeah, I'd be glad to have you come over and visit with us. And I got a feeling they'd love to have you. You're so teachable. You got a sweet spirit, and that they would just love to. And then you want to soak up all you can, and you want to watch and observe, and then make those things a matter of prayer and say, Lord, make me like that. You know, that's a great question. Great question. You know, guys, you can do the same thing. Ask some guy, hey, can I help you? Can I come over and hang around can I help you around your house? Can I do anything for you? And that's, if you wonder how do you work your way into a person's life, you do it by serving them. You offer to serve them. People don't turn down opportunities to have someone to serve them. You offer to help them out in life's responsibilities, and that's the way you work your way into their life, and they entrust themselves to you and open up, share their hearts, share their experiences, share their home, all kinds of things. Okay? Should we call it? What time is it? My goodness, we've been talking all day today, haven't we? It's been a great day. Been a great day. Thanks for your attentiveness. Can I share